Well, I got to tell you, today I'm thinking about steady eddies. There are some steady eddies in the chapel here today, and some of you who are joining us by way of live stream may be a steady eddy. The Blessed Mother was a steady eddy. St. Camillus de Laelis was a steady eddy, and I got to tell you, I am not a steady eddy. So when you talk about a steady eddy, those are the kinds of people who are always consistently calm, unaffected in a bad way by the events around them, not prone to take any detours, not prone to be people who necessarily become distracted by what's going on around them. And the reason why I say that we pay attention to people who are steady eddies is because that's exactly what Jesus is. And he shows it today. You know, as Matthew lets us know, that, very clearly, Jesus went into some circles where people didn't appreciate him. And not only didn't appreciate him, they wanted the worst for him. And Matthew lets us know that today. The Pharisees were eager, were hell-bent, if you will, of putting Jesus to death. And, it was an interesting thing. I think when most of us, if we take a look at this kinds of threats, the first thing that we want to do is like defend ourselves, to fight. And so what happens in today's gospel is that Jesus does neither. He doesn't fight, nor does he flee. But he keeps on moving to do what he was sent to do. Heal the sick, forgive those who were sinners, give people a sense of hope. And it's interesting that this passage that we heard from Isaiah the prophet that is contained in Matthew's gospel, it's the longest Old Testament passage that is put within Matthew's gospel. And we remember that Matthew's gospel was written for Jewish Christians. But what's so important about the passage and why Matthew put it in there is because he's describing for us Jesus as the steady eddy. That he's moving on, undisturbed by what's going on around him, and focusing his attention on what he needs to be focused on. All of those things that are contained within within the passage from Isaiah the prophet. A bruised reed he will not break, a smoldering wick he will not quench. And within the context of all of that, one of the messages that we receive from Jesus as the steady eddy is while he would not give in to the Pharisees, he was not going to give up on them either. If there was a way in which he was going to fight the Pharisees, it was going to be because of his dedication by sticking to the task that his Father gave him. So it seems to me, my sisters and brothers, that there are two lessons that we can learn from this passage, or at least two lessons we can learn. First of all, that we strive in our own lives, by our trust in the Lord, that we can be steady eddies. One of the things that I've become so discouraged about in my own life, I get fired up about things that I should get fired up about. I do get fired up about things I shouldn't get fired up about. And lots of times that really affects my prayer. And I get pulled away from the focus of wanting to be with the Lord in my prayer. And so if you feel the same kind of thing, if you get fired up about stuff you shouldn't get fired up about, maybe today you could join me in praying with the Lord and to the Lord that he can help us to be more steady eddies in those things, that we can trust him more and let his agenda continue to overtake our hearts. But the second thing that we can take from this gospel is to be ever so grateful that Jesus is the ultimate steady eddy. And just as Jesus would not give up on the Pharisees, he would not quench the smoldering wick, as Isaiah would say. That's the same way he treats us. And we can be ever so grateful because it's his mercy as our Savior that gives us hope. So let's rejoice in both of those lessons today. And as a side note, let's be grateful for all of those people who are steady eddies because they teach us an important lesson that Jesus wants us to learn.